Mantras of our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother says, in the integrality and absoluteness of bhakti and surrender, we find the essential condition of perfect peace leading to uninterrupted bliss. With my love and blessings, says our Divine Mother. Words of our Lord Sri Aurobindo from the collective works of our Lord Sri Aurobindo book Letters on Yoga, Volume 4, Book 31, page 217, topic Ego and its forms, subtopic Ego and Egoism. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, I suppose the ego came into the human activity first as a means of the outer consciousness, individualizing itself in the flux of nature, and secondly, as an incentive for a tamasic animal man to act and get something done. Otherwise, he might merely have contented himself with food and sleep and done nothing else. With that incentive of ego, possession, vanity, ambition, eagerness for power, etc., he began doing all sorts of things he might never otherwise have done. But now that he has to go higher, this ego comes badly in the way. Yes, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo, yes, ego is the reason of the difficulty in everybody. But that pride of the ego is the case with all human beings. All the action is shot through with ego, acts, feelings, thoughts, everything, big or small, good or bad. Even humility and what is called altruism is with most people only a form of ego. It does not depend on having something to be proud of. It is so with everybody. Human nature is shot through in all its stuff with the threads of ego. Even when one tries to get away from it, it is in front or walks behind all the thoughts and actions like one's shadow. To see is the first step. To discern the falsity and absurdity of the ego movements is the second. To discourage and refuse it at every step is the third. But it goes entirely only when one sees, experiences, and lives the one in everything and equally everywhere. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the human being is naturally egoistic and ego-centered. All he does, thinks, feels, has the stamp of the ego on it, and it cannot be otherwise until he turns to make not the ego but the divine the center of his existence, and thinks and acts and feels only for the divine, or until he enters into the higher or the divine consciousness, or the divine consciousness into him, for in the divine consciousness there is no ego. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, all human beings are full of ego. If you want to change, You must be very quiet and always aspire for a higher consciousness to come down into you, in which there is not the ego. When it comes down, the real change will come. But you must be quiet within, not worried and restless. You must often confidently open yourself to the Mother's force and let it work in you. Our Lord Aurobindo says the human consciousness is permeated in all its past ideas with this substance of egoism. It is only by a constant quiet vigilance and increasing consciousness that it can be got out, for it is not allowed to play openly. It conceals itself and takes subtle and disguised forms. Our Lord Aurobindo says it is the ego that is showing itself in its true character. Formerly, it was associating with the sadhana because it either got something of what it desired or had great expectations. Now that these things are held back and the demand for the true attitude is made on it, it resists or non cooperates, saying no value in such a sadhana. In all the sadhaks here, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo, in all the sadhaks here, the ego in its physical or vital physical roots is proving to be the stumbling block. No transformation is possible unless it changes. Obviously, unless the object is nirvana, the small ego has to be attended to, not indulged but transformed out of existence. Yes, that is right. To remember constantly. To remember constantly and live in the peace and calmness so that the force may work and the light may come. The small things of daily life must go on in the surface consciousness, not filling too large a place in it, until the force and light have taken possession and can lay direct hold of these also. Our Lord says it is the ego that gives them too big a place. The ego must be discouraged, not for myself, but for the divine, should grow to be the law of the whole consciousness and thought and action. It cannot be done thoroughly all at once, but that must become the insistent note in the mind as soon as possible. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, I meant by thinking of the divine, the giving up of the preoccupation with your ego and its rights and claims and ideas of unfair treatment and all the rest, and to think more of the divine and the seeking for the divine for which you came here, and make that your chief preoccupation. It is not in meditation alone, but in life and thought and act and feeling that has to be done. Human nature, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo, human nature has always been egoistic in its basis, and so it brings in the ego motive into the work for the divine also. That can only be overcome slowly, for what is ingrained in the human vital nature and has been active through hundreds of lives cannot disappear at once. To be conscious and to have a steady will to change and make the inner motive of bhakti and self-giving prevail over the outer motives is the one thing necessary. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, if you are becoming so conscious of the ego and the animal which fills so large a place in every human being, it is really a progress, because to be conscious is the first step. But along with it, you must have an aspiration and a confident faith in the divine power and grace and in the divine element within you, psychic and spiritual, that through these the nature will be transformed and the ego replaced by the true person and the animal by the true vital and physical being become fit instruments of the Divine Mother. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, yes, these experiences of the smallness of the egoistic person always come when one is opening into the wideness of the cosmic consciousness, and your conclusions are correct. The self-importance of the ego has to dissolve. The self-importance of the ego has to dissolve. The importance of life or the progress of the being can come only from its being a vehicle of the divine play, evolution, realization, and that is independent of the vastness of space and time. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the right attitude is to see that as a separate being, as an ego, one has no importance whatever, and the insistence on one's own desires, pride, position, etc., is an ignorance. But one matters only as a spirit, as a portion of the divine, not more than others, but as all souls matter to the soul of all. Impersonality in itself is not the divine. All these mistakes can be and are made by many who claim to be in an impersonalized consciousness. A force may be impersonal, but may be also a wrong force. Many think that they are impersonal and free from ego because they are obeying a force or something bigger than their own personality. But that force or that something may be quite other than the divine, and it may hold them by something in their personality and ego. Our Lord says the degree of sensitivity depends on the nature of the ego. Some egoists are hard-skinned and not sensitive at all, and others are hypersensitive. Next topic, ego in different parts of the being. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says ego rises because it is its nature to do so. It wants to keep hold of the being which it considers its property and field of expression. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, your ego does come up from time to time without your seeing that it is the ego. It comes up not in your higher parts but in your physical mind and consciousness. And you think that because your higher parts are clear, this also is clear. Ego, whatever its basis, can reproduce itself in different parts of the being. For example, a vital ego, a mental ego, but fundamentally it is one. Our Lord says the mind and the vital are much more full of ego than the body. In the body, the ego is obscure and instinctive only. There is no reason why ego should not be conquered in the end although it is difficult even in the external nature. Our Lord says the fight with the ego is the part of the fight with the physical nature, for it is the superficial ego in the physical consciousness, irrational and instinctive, that refuses to go. The correspondent asked our Lord Sri Aurobindo whether egoism remains at least in the physical being as long as the body remains. For this our Lord says, no, it need not. It is so thought because the old yogas did not care about the liberation of the body and other instruments and thought only of the separation of the soul from the Prakriti. If you do not liberate the Prakriti, ego and other forms of bondage will naturally remain so long as there is any action of the Prakriti, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Next subtopic, the vital ego. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says the earth consciousness does not want to change, so it rejects what comes down to it from above. It has always done so. It is only if those who have taken up this integral yoga upon themselves and are willing to change their lower nature that this unwillingness can disappear. What stands in the way of the course is always the vital ego, with its ignorance and the pride of the ignorance, and physical consciousness with its inertia, which resents and resists any call to change, and its indolence, which does not like to take the trouble. It finds it more comfortable to go on its own way, repeating always the same old movements at its best, expecting everything to be done for it in some way at some time. The first thing Allah says, the first thing is to have the right inner attitude. You have that. The rest is the will to transform oneself and the vigilance to pursue and reject all that belongs to the ego and the tamasic persistence of the lower nature. Finally, to keep oneself always open to the Divine Mother in every part of the being, so that the process of transformation may find no hindrance. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, yes, in ordinary life there must be a control over the vital and the ego, otherwise life would be impossible. Our Lord continues to say, it is much better to tell any feelings of dissatisfactions to others, but you are not alone in these feelings. 2/3 of the ashram have them in more or less vehemence. It is the unregenerate vital ego which is just the thing that stands most in the way of transformation. Other things are comparatively mild obstacles compared with this part of the being. It is much better that the Divine Mother refused consideration to this part of you. Consideration would have been a more dangerous test than refusal. Our Lord says, yes, it is a false sense of importance is a thing which comes to many. Exaggerated and made a principal part of the vital attitude, it has been the cause of failure and departure of several who considered themselves great sadhaks. They made it an excuse for indulging and magnifying the vital ego. Since you see that it is ridiculous, you should have no difficulty in getting rid of it. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says the only truth in it is that each one who opens himself in such a way that the force can get through to his material so as to change it will by that be contributing to the force, the victory of the force, but applies to everybody and not to any one individual. Our Lord says, yes, the talk about advanced sadhaks. The talk about advanced sadhaks is a thing I've always discouraged. But people go on because that appeals to the vital ego. Our Lord says, I've already told you the nature of the difficulty that has arisen in you. That is nothing but the revolt of your vital mind and the vital ego, and I have pointed out to you the only way in which it can be overcome. You had, by an effort supported by a special concentration from us, arrived at a first psychic opening in your mind, heart, which enabled you even to throw out for a time the obsession from your vital consciousness. But as often opens soon after that is obscure, egoistic, and self centered, in the vital being rose up in revolt and created a confused farrago of desires, demands, disappointments, grievances, misapprehensions, false reasonings, and especially a wrong attitude of claim and demand, which was the entire contradiction of the psychic and spiritual attitude and wholly inconsistent with the right conditions of the sadhana. It is this of which your recent letters were full. The forces that use this kind of vital condition for the breaking of the sadhak's spiritual chances become active and turned all into a drive to go away. Your only chance is to refuse and to listen to all these ideas and suggestions and adopt resolutely an attitude of complete self giving, refusal of all feelings of desire, claim, ego, all justification of these feelings by the vital mind, which is full of a false view of things and therefore cannot be trusted even when its reasoning seems to be plausible. Others before you have entered into this rill of the vital mind and ego have gone on justifying and indulging in it. The only result was a constant repetition of the vital crisis, sometimes ending in departure and failure of the sadhana, others by a repeated action of the psychic finally succeeded in emerging out of the chaos. But we have found that to comply with the claims, demands, clamors, and ultimums of the vital mind in this condition is the worst way to meet the difficulty. It increases demands, revolts, outbursts of ego, and makes the recurrence and continuance of the vital crisis endless. You must get out of your head the idea that you have a right to demand this or that from the Divine Mother because she is accepted by you as a divine and that she is bound to satisfy you, and any refusal is an offense and an outrage. The Divine Mother acts and decides in all freedom according to her vision and judgment, and she cannot be expected to act according to the desires, opinions, or demands of the sadhaks, nor can they judge by their minds her reasons or motives, for these do not belong to the ordinary consciousness in which the mind moves. For her to obey the dictates of the sadhaks or their claims and desires would be to make her work meaningless and a failure. Apart from that, the basis of this integral yoga is a self-giving and surrender of the sadhak to the divine, his acceptance of guidance by a higher consciousness than his own. A reversal of the position, an imposition of the will of the lower consciousness on the divine or the guru is not admissible. Yet the position you have taken, demand, amounts to that and nothing else. This attitude must cease if you want to get out of your difficulty. I have tried to make the position clear to you. It is for you to accept or not to accept what I have said, but it is only way for the sadhana, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo.
वक्त्रादशभुजा दशपादाञ्जनप्रभा विशालया राजमाना त्रिंशल्लोचनमालया स्फुरद्दशनद्रंष्ट्रा सा भीमरूपा विभूमिप रूपसौभाग्यकान्तिना सा प्रतिष्ठा महर्षिया एषा सा वैष्णवी माया महाकाली दुरत्यया आराधिता वशीकुर्यात् पूजा कर्तुश्चराचर सर्वदेव शरीरेभ्यो याभिर्भूताहमितप्रभा त्रिगुणा सा महालक्ष्मीः साक्षान् महिषमर्दिनी साक्षान् महिषमर्दिनी साक्षान् महिषमर्दिनी
गन्धपुष्पे एकदधिपते देवा ॐ श्री दुर्गायै नमः श्री मीरायै नमः ॐ श्री मीरायै नमः
ॐ कमलोत्पलधारिण्या शक्त्या लिङ्गितविग्रहं स्मेराननं सुप्रसन्नं साधकाभीष्टदायकम् ॐ गुरुभ्यो नमः